A very good morning. It's 9:30. We start this edition with the news break that's coming in from Canada. In fact, once again, Canada has repeated the bogus charges surrounding that plot to target Khalistanis in Canada. Not just that, the Canadian minister has admitted to having shared intel information on India with US publication. It's a Canadian minister who's reiterated allegations of India's involvement in a purported plot to target Khalistani activists in the country. The minister has also admitted to having shared intel with US media on India. Listen in to that statement that's coming from David Morrison, Trudeau government minister, who's admitted to having shared sensitive information against India with the US media.
We were talking to different audiences. And so we deliberately chose, as Madame Drouin said in her introductory remarks, a credible, internationally read newspaper that would carry our side of the story. We chose a journalist who had a long record of background in this particular issue. He had written on it a number of times before. And through the Washington Post, we were speaking directly to our friends in the United States. We were speaking to our allies in the United Kingdom and elsewhere. And we were also speaking directly to Indians.
And joining us on the broadcast is Bhavna Dahiya. She's a foreign expert, founder, International Council on Human Rights, Peace and Politics. Appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. That's a statement coming in from the Canadian minister who's admitted that he did share intel information on India with the US publication. Where do you see India-Canada relations heading here on, given that that's the first admission coming in from Canada on sharing crucial information with the US media?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And yes, there's just so much to talk about this matter. And I think with the rise of course, this nationalism and populism around the world today, each state is in pursuit of national power. And there's national interest defined in terms of power. And what better power than data today, right? It's intel. I think this deliberate leak of sensitive intelligence to the Washington Post by a senior Canadian official, and again, the timeline, just before crucial meetings with India's national security advisor, I think this represents not just a breach of diplomatic protocol, but a very calculated attempt to weaponize media narratives against India. This unprecedented action shows a very troubling departure from established diplomatic norms. I think this is more than just a diplomatic faux pas. It signals a very big paradigm shift in how Western nations are attempting to recalibrate their diplomatic leverage against emerging powers like India. Now, amidst all of this, I think the future of India-Canada relations, they have to be built on mutual respect. They have to be built on strategic trust and recognition of changed global realities. Now, this old paradigm of Western nations again and again attempting to influence India's policy choices through media pressure on public diplomacy is obsolete, right? What we need more is a mature partnership that acknowledges India's rise as a global power and Canada's potential role as a strategic partner, and not just, weaponizing media narratives to, again, challenging India's power here. Right. So I think this so-called securitization and weaponization of intelligence for narrative building against India, this demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of modern India's diplomatic resilience. When a G7 nation resorts to media leaks before diplomatic dialogues, I think it exposes the limitations of traditional Western diplomatic tools here. The India-Canadian relationship, I think it's much more nuanced. It has been built over 7 decades of diplomatic engagement. We have a 1.6 million strong Indian diaspora. This leak doesn't just breach protocols here. I think it betrays the trust of generations of Indo-Canadians who have served as a living bridge between our nations. This deliberate leak to the Washington Post, again, also, yes.
Yes, and just a follow-up question to that, the open appeasement of the Khalistanis comes just with months to go for the Canada elections. How do you see this changing the political dynamics in Canada, given that elections are due next year in 2025?
I think, this speaks much more than, politics and diplomacy here. I think it's also much more about bilateral economic relations too, with bilateral trade reaching $8 billion annually, and educational partnerships, which is more now modeled on political side here. I think critical cooperation is much more needed. And again, looking at the strategic consequence of this leak, this goes much beyond political, relations. It goes much beyond bilateral relations. It challenges the entire framework of, how India-Canadian relationships are being seen. And of course, again, at this critical juncture, I think it needs to be much more built around recognizing and acknowledging three non-negotiable principles: respect for India's strategic autonomy, adherence to established diplomatic protocols, and also recognition of India's legitimate role in shaping the emerging world order. Now, it's just so funny that how when domestic and diplomatic issues happen within domestic territories of Western nations, they're just domestic issues to be dealt with, the policies around there. But when something related to India and something related to emerging powers happen with this, which is again related to something amidst and inside their borders, it becomes a very significant political and a very big international issue that needs to be defined through the lens of human rights, through the lens of international law, and it's just so it becomes very problematic there. Now, I think the future of India-Canada relations will not just be determined by isolated incidents like this Morrison leak, especially, and also the outcome of the elections now, but I think by our ability to construct a new diplomatic architecture that now reflects contemporary global realities. This specifically requires moving beyond traditional Western diplomatic frameworks to again embrace a more nuanced and a multi-dimensional engagement that needs to go beyond the weaponization of security, the weaponization of frameworks of intelligence leaks. I think it needs to be much more about Canada now realizing India's potential role in the emerging world order.